is having compassion and understanding for our parents and how they ended up the way they are, and stuff like, okay, you can see it and know, like, we know our parents' origin stories better than anybody. We know exactly, like, that's why,
Yeah.
grandma did this, grandpa did that. I understand. And also saying, I can have compassion for that. And that doesn't make it okay for them to treat me badly. That doesn't
Yes.
mean that it's okay that they weren't there for me, that they didn't learn a better way of doing things. And so there really needs to be that balance of like, okay, I get it. And also, here's the limit. Here's how I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way anymore. And to pass on better tools to, like our nieces and nephews and our children. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, so this is really how we start healing a generation.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser, and this week my guest is Catherine Stevens. She specializes in helping women heal from their toxic moms. She does this using a unique blend of hypnotherapy and coaching. Helping women heal their mother wounds and reconnect to their authentic self is her passion. So, everybody, please welcome Catherine. First of all, I want to apologize for my voice because I did lose it for being sick, but I found Catherine on TikTok. Her videos resonated with me so much. For those of you who are like avid listeners of my podcast, you know that I grew up with a toxic mom. And, for 20 years, I could not figure out how to make this woman love me, see me, appreciate me, hear me. And then I realized that this woman, who is the person that I shared a heartbeat with, will never change. And that's kind of like the conversation I wanted to have with Catherine here on the podcast, because there are so many of us who have the mother wound and we really don't know how to turn it off. I think it's something that, and you could agree or disagree with me, Catherine, but I think it's something that will carry with us for the rest of our life, because it's a natural thing for a child to want the mother, especially, to love them. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. I think I think there's some nuance to it. I think there's obviously that aspect that you do carry it with you, but then that it does, with like healing and time and acceptance, really, it does lessen. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this thing that becomes your identity anymore. And I think that's really where like why I even started doing this work in the first place, is
Oh
like I
my
didn't want to
gosh.
just be the daughter of a toxic mom. Like I wanted to be more than that, and like to help other people step into, okay, so who are you outside of this dynamic, this relationship? And so
Yeah.
it really is, it's a deep thing. It's a deep
It
work. It's
is. It's
not
a
like
huge, it's a
yeah.
lot of stuff. So let's go to the beginning, Catherine. Let's talk about your journey. How did this all begin for you?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So really it all began about, I think it was 12 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. And I was at a healing conference and I realized, like, they were talking about stuff with father wounds. I was like, yeah, yeah. And then they started talking about mother wounds and I was on the floor sobbing. I had no idea. I was like, all of these things just kind of started coming together. And I was like, this is something that I had no idea was affecting me so deeply. And so that was kind of the beginning of starting to unravel and unpack this dynamic, this relationship that I had with my mom. And, kind of fast forwarding a bit, things really came to a head. It was about 7 years later after I had like met my husband. I got married. We were having our first kid. And, just there was so much tension and so much stuff, and just realizing even more so, like, how incapable I was of even setting boundaries with my parents and to protect my marriage, to protect my family.
Uh,
And so that was such a big, okay, I don't even know how to do this. And so how do I learn how? And there were so many emotional things that were holding me back. And so for me, it wasn't until we went no contact. We actually, like, we kind of like had our last straw. We like wrote a letter and was like, hey, this is what we need to move forward. And the response was, don't contact us.
hmm.
And so from that place of, okay, then what do you do? So
Yeah.
like your parent cuts you off. So then what? And, what really changed for me and what led me to be able to do the work I'm doing now is I discovered hypnotherapy.
Oh,
I met with a hypnotist, and through the sessions that I had, and it was short, it was like 3 sessions, maybe 4 at the most. And it was exactly what I needed to learn how. I just was able to release so much where I was like, this isn't holding me back anymore. This isn't this burden that I'm carrying. And it opened me up to be able to be like, okay, well, I want to help other people who are doing this.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, like it was really it was such a long journey, but then it was kind of like, because I had been doing so many things before, I was like that push that I needed. And I was like, oh, so this is how you can help people really do that, helping them heal on that deeper level, connecting to those emotions.
Yeah.
And
So before
yeah,
you were at this conference, did you ever like think that your mom was toxic or no? Like you just thought like
I
all
no,
moms were
no.
like this?
Yeah, I knew we had a difficult relationship. You know, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so that was a huge identity thing for me for so long. I was like, well, like you have to do like get to know yourself. Like, oh, well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And that's who I was. That was my
Yeah.
role. That was everything. And so yeah, I had no idea that our relationship wasn't really normal. Like I knew it wasn't great. It wasn't like other moms, but I didn't realize like how deep it went, and
Yeah.
it's not that, I think some people think like, oh, well, your mom has to be this horrific person for her to have been toxic. And I don't think that's true. Like there's so much nuance to it, like
Yeah.
everyone experiences things differently. And so I think because like it wasn't this blatant, like obvious, horrific thing, that I was like, oh, well, it's fine. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And
And
so I really had no idea.
do all your siblings feel the same way about your mom or
Um, some of them see it more than others. Everyone, that's something that I've really had to let go. Like they get to do their own journey with this work.
yeah.
And so some of them see it and they're like, yeah, I see that, but they're all a lot younger than me. And so they're just working it out for themselves, what works best
Yeah.
for them. And so some of them I'm closer with, others we're not anymore. And that's just,
Yeah.
that's just how it goes. When you start breaking apart these family dynamics, like some people see it and they're like, oh yeah, I get where you're coming from. And others like, oh no, it was fine, to keep,
Mhm.
sweeping it under the rug and pretending like, oh, well, you're the problem.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I'm one of 7, and
Okay,
I'm the
yeah.
baby actually, and my mom
Oh yeah.
was very toxic, sh and to this day, like, my some of my siblings are like, "Oh, well, that's just mom, that's just how she is," and,
Uh-huh.
you just have to accept it, and especially in my culture, it's like you have to honor and respect your mother and father, and it's like, but if they're not honoring and respecting me, why should I? Give her
Yeah.
that same adoration. And the thing with like the mother wound, it does affect so many aspects of your life. And I really would like
Hmm.
you to talk a little bit more, maybe give some examples because like my mom was physically and emotionally abusive. But like, let's talk about some of the nuances that are not like, it doesn't have to be physical, like you said. It doesn't have to be like
Yeah.
really, really toxic for it to be toxic, but enough for you to realize that this isn't normal behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest, one of the biggest things, the biggest sign of like an emotionally immature, toxic mom is when she does something that hurts you and you bring it up and she can't own it. That is a huge, for me, that's a big, I don't know, I feel like red flag is so overused, but that's a sign that, okay, you're dealing with an emotionally immature person who can't own what they did. And
Yeah.
so she is trying to, oh, well, it didn't really happen that way. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. All the avoiding, well, you're being overly sensitive, like the gaslighting and stuff. So that avoidance is really, such a big thing. And it starts to make you question yourself like, well, did it really happen that way? Maybe I am being overly sensitive. And what happens, and I think the biggest thing that I realized is like I would shut down so much of my own thoughts or like intuitive, insights or whatever, because I was constantly putting it through this filter and it was a bad filter, but it's the one that I was raised with. And so it's
Yeah.
that doubt, it's that self questioning where, well, you can't really trust what you feel. You can't really trust what you think because someone's over here invalidating it all the time. So I would say that's really a big one is like if you're
Yeah.
constantly questioning yourself and doubting yourself, like maybe there's a mother wound there.
Yes.
Because you had someone who was actively like, no, it didn't happen that way, because it's all about making sure she looks good and she looks okay and like she looks like a good mom. And
Yeah.
you have this, perfect ideal relationship when really behind closed doors, it isn't that way.
Yeah.
Um,
I was
so
just talking
that's,
about this with a friend, is like how important it is to be able to repair,
yeah,
and it's not just with like a mother or a father, it's like with your husband, with a friend. If you get into
yeah,
an argument, and like you said, and you're trying to, tell her or them how you feel, and they're invalidating or making you feel like that's not how it happened, you took it wrong, like you said, you're overly sensitive, like they're invalidating how you feel. You don't have to agree all the time. You could agree to disagree,
yeah,
but you could also say, I am sorry that I made you feel that way. That wasn't my intention. But like if that person cannot say those words, cannot really
hmm,
apologize, and not take accountability for how they made you feel, that is a red flag, or, that is a
yeah,
sign that says, like, wow, my mom, my dad can't accept responsibility. They can't
hmm,
own what they did to me. They can't, say, hey, I'm really sorry, and
yeah,
that's the thing that's really hard, because, toxic parents, you want so badly to have their approval.
yeah,
As
yeah,
a
oh
child,
yeah,
that's what we want, is we want their approval, we want the safety, we want the trust, we want the love, we want the, the comfort. And when those things aren't given to us, we as children take it upon us to think, well, then maybe there's something wrong with me.
yeah,
Maybe it's me. Like you said earlier, you start to doubt yourself and your own
hmm,
intuition and your own, like, you start to think like, well, maybe I am wrong. Maybe I did misread that, or maybe I am being a little bit too crazy. Like, and that was one thing growing up. My mom would always say that I was dramatic. I was dramatic.
yeah,
Estás loca, everything was like, and then I would question myself, like, am I really crazy? Am I really dramatic? But then now in my 40s, I could look back, and I could, like, kind of like put myself in a third person eye view and see
yeah,
that, like,
yeah,
if this was to happen to one of my nieces or my nephews, I would not allow it. I would think that
hmm,
that is definitely abuse. Like, what they did to
yeah,
me was abuse, and I wasn't crazy, and it's a
yeah.
hard realization to come to. But yeah, the mother wound. Let's talk a little bit more about the mother wound and signs of the mother wound, and like how we can really not only become aware of it, but like do things to like help ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of the biggest signs, we've kind of talked about it already, is like that doubting yourself, that questioning, and stuff like, okay, can I really trust myself? Another thing is when there is conflict, when you hurt someone else's feelings, do you spiral within yourself and feel a lot of shame?
Mm.
And stuff
Oh,
where it's hard
yes.
for you. Yeah, I know.
Yes,
I
I
was
do.
like, me too. And it's so hard to realize that, because you're like, because you don't want to be like the toxic parent who can't own up to their stuff, but then at the same time you feel so much shame and so much embarrassment because you did something that hurt somebody. And so like struggling yourself, like to own up to when you make mistakes, to be able to speak kindly to yourself, and you have this negative internal dialogue or like restricting yourself all the time, like that's a sign, like you have this, this kind of unconscious voice in the back saying like, well, you can't do that. And it's once again, it's that questioning, it's that doubting, it's all these things. And so when you start to notice yourself acting in these toxic ways or being unable to make space to be able to validate how you feel about something, that's another big one.
Yeah.
Because mothers are supposed to be that kind, loving, nurturing space. And so when you feel those big emotions, okay, they're supposed to give you guidance, right? All right, it's okay to feel upset. It's okay to be angry. And also, here's the limit. When you're angry, we don't throw things, whatever it is. Like
Right.
there's supposed to be that like that educational part. Like, okay, there's this space and then there's structure also. There's this boundary within it. And so if you find yourself completely ungrounded and just scattered, especially when you feel these big emotions, like that's a sign like there was something that was missing when you were young. There wasn't that structure, there wasn't that guidance, that nurturing, loving voice there to help you.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think those are kind of like the big ones. And like I said, there's a lot of nuance to it. Like we could, deep dive into pretty much everything,
Yeah, exactly. I think
And
about
so it's
that
just so
you
much.
just said, because like, you know, now I don't have children of my own. I have two stepsons, but I have a lot of little nieces and nephews. And like I just recently went over to go visit my niece, and she was having these big emotions. She was crying. She's only 5, and her mom had told her to pick up her toys, and it was just like too much for her, and she's like bawling her
Yeah.
eyes out, like to the point where she could barely breathe. And I just remember like sitting her on my lap and holding her and telling her, I love you. Everything's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. Like my mom never did
Hmm.
that for me. Like
Yeah.
she didn't create that safe space for me to be able to learn how to regulate my emotions. Instead, she
Hmm.
just told me to, cállate el hocico y vete para allá, like go over there, and then you're
Yeah.
stuck
Yeah.
in your room not knowing how to regulate your emotions. And then you feel, like you said earlier, guilty for having these
Yeah.
emotions. You feel shame and you feel guilt. And then you have these like blame sessions, and you're like, man, if I was only a better person, if I could
Oh,
only
yeah.
learn how to do this, or you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that then spirals into what I became, was a type A people pleaser, like
Yeah.
overachiever type of person, because I thought if and only if I did A, B, and C and D, then my mother will recognize me. Then she will
Yeah.
give me the love. Then she will finally see me for who I am. And it's like, I'm now 43 years old, and it took me a long time to realize that 20 years that she was never going to change. And no,
Yeah.
not all the things that I could do, all the tools, all the therapy, all the stuff that I could do is ever going to make her change. The person has to want to change.
Yes. 100%. And I think that's the biggest thing when people come, like, and I'm working with clients, and that's like the first, I'm like, okay, so you need to know she's not going to change. Most likely it's never going to happen, apart from like lightning strike from above, like miracle encounter, like it's probably not going to happen because it takes a lot of work, and it's scary for someone who has, and this is something I think is important, is having compassion and understanding for our parents and how they ended up the way they are, and stuff like, okay, you can see it and know, like, we know our parents' origin stories better than anybody. We know exactly, like, that's why,
Yeah.
grandma did this, grandpa did that. I understand. And also saying I can have compassion for that, and that doesn't make it okay for them to treat me badly. That doesn't
Yes.
mean that it's okay that they weren't there for me, that they didn't learn a better way of doing things. And so there really needs to be that balance of like, okay, I get it. And also, here's the limit. Here's how I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way anymore. And to pass on better tools to, yeah, like our nieces and nephews and our children. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, so really how we start healing a generation,
Yes.
like it's to just, and that feels big to say it, but it is like when you can make space for someone and let them feel what they feel, like, and also, with the boundaries around it, right? With that protection, with that safety, like that's how you can heal things. That's how you really move forward.
Yeah.
It's so important.
So, how hard was it and how hard is it? Because that was one thing that took me a really long time, is to finally be okay. Well, here's the thing, like I didn't have to give my mom no contact. My mom no contacted my ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't have to.
Yeah,
Like
it happens.
she just was like, my mom was the type of person that was like, she had kids because that's what she thought she was supposed to do, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And, she told me all of my life to my face, I never really wanted you, and it's like
Yeah.
she doesn't have, and this is what I want people to understand who are listening. Not every woman with a uterus
Yeah.
should have children. And if
Hmm.
you do not want to become a parent or be a mother, it is okay to not be a mother. It is okay
Yeah.
to decide not to have children. And that's the thing. My mom is such a selfish human being. And
Hmm.
if she just wouldn't have had kids, she would have lived a good life. It's okay to be a selfish human being. Don't bring people into your world if you want to stay selfish, though, right? Uh,
Yeah, that's so true.
don't bring
Yeah,
people
that's
into
not going
your
to work
world.
out well.
It's not going to work out well. And so, like, for me, like, my mom kicked me out and stopped talking to me and just would never talk to me at all. Um, And like, but my inner child was still like, look at me, please, like trying to do the cartwheels
Yeah,
and trying
yeah,
to do the things to get her attention.
yes,
So what would you say to someone who is in that place of, they know that they're supposed to, for their own mental health, stay
yeah,
away? What would you say to them? Like, how do you make that transition where it's time to like break away and really
yeah.
hold the boundary?
Hmm. So, like, if you know your mom is toxic and you're taking these steps, I think the biggest thing is to give yourself permission to not have a relationship with your mom anymore. That's such a big societal thing, and stuff. It's like, oh, but it's your mother, and you only have one mom, and there's all these pressures and stuff, and like in family and whoever, like all this, oh, but it's your mom. And yes, it's my mom, and she's not a good person for me to be around. Yeah, she's my mom, and it's detrimental to my mental and emotional health. And so I think the biggest thing is to start giving yourself permission for it to look different, for your relationship with her to be different, and just say, okay, this isn't good for me. This isn't okay. And to really start releasing some of those emotional ties. And even like there's a great visualization that I started teaching people is like just even imagining, like seeing yourself standing next to your mom and like seeing those emotional ties, like all those connectors, all those memories, all that stuff. And then to start just cutting it away,
Mm,
chopping it, whatever, whatever feels right for you, but to just start to remove those ties because that's really what's keeping you so tight and so wrapped up in your mom. And when you're starting to get that distance to like to visualize it, even acting it out is so powerful. Um, but to start giving yourself, okay, let's get that distance
yeah.
so that you're not, because you do like with moms like this, they like sometimes they want you to be really emotionally enmeshed. You're very in tune with how she feels and what's going on. And so like setting a boundary feels like you're like chopping your arm off. And it's like, no, 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 like getting that distance first, like taking a step back from your mom and saying, okay, no, you get to be over there and I'm going to be over here. And that's okay.
Uh,
I think that's huge.
yeah, that is huge. And I think that like like you said earlier, society has it all wrong because they do make you feel guilty. Oh, that's your mom.
Yeah.
That's this. That you
Mhm.
have to honor thy mother. And it's like, but if we take away the titles, and
Yeah.
she doesn't have that title of mother, brother, sister, father, or whatever, is the human being
Yeah.
respectful, loving, and honoring you? Are they
Hmm.
treating, do they make you feel good? Like, I remember I told years ago, I told one of my best friends, like, I have to go visit my mom, but I had crazy anxiety for 3 days.
Yeah.
And she's like, Paola, if you're feeling anxiety, like, this should not be a place you should go, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like people force this ideology that you have to have this relationship with your mother or your father, or your sister, or your brother, or your cousin, or your grandmother. But if there is no like real connection, no real
Hmm.
love, no real authentic
Yeah.
relationship, you shouldn't force it. I, I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really don't
There is.
think you should force it, you know?
And people do because they're like, oh, but it's the title. And so that's part of like, yeah, that distance again is okay, seeing your mom for the human that she is, and even knocking your parents off this pedestal of like, okay, well, they're above, because with that stuff, like honoring your parents, stuff, when you're a child, yeah, sure, like that's your job. Like you literally are dependent on them for everything. And when you're an adult, you can still be respectful, but you're on the same playing field now. This isn't a hierarchy anymore. And a lot of parents where they kind of destroy their relationships with their adult kids is they still want the hierarchy. Well,
Yes.
I'm your mother, so you need to come and do what I want. You need to bring me the grandkids. You need to do this. And these poor women are feeling all this pressure. Like, I don't want to do that. It makes me feel stressed. It makes me feel anxious. Like, I don't like how it is when we go to visit. And it's because she has the title. And so, like, your mom is just like anybody else. Like, and so, yeah, if you feel anxiety, you feel all this stuff, like, it's okay to not go. And once again, giving yourself permission because you're
Yes.
an adult now. Like, it's shifting your mindset. It's like, no, no, I'm a grown up. I
Yeah.
actually get to decide what this looks like. And so
Yes.
much of it really is, I think, yeah, like once again, like giving yourself permission, like this gets to be what I need it to be. This is, what's best for my family. and not
Yeah.
just feeding into the family system that you grew up in.
Yes.
It's
I
huge.
love that you said that because I remember when I was young, when I was not younger, well, I was only in my 20s and 30s, but when I would go and visit my mom and we would have these like conversations and she would say the most awful things to me and I would feel like annihilated emotionally and spiritually after leaving that, conversation and I would revert back to my childhood. Like I would revert
Yeah.
back to my 9-year-old self,
Mhm.
just wanting that like validation that I was good enough. And then I realized, like you said, I realized, hey, I'm not that 9-year-old anymore. I'm actually 35 and I don't need to deal with this
Yeah.
anymore. I don't need her.
Mhm.
Like before, it was like, yes, you need her because she was the person that provided the house and the food and the electricity and all that stuff. But if you are in your own home and you're providing for yourself, you really don't need your parents anymore. And if they're mistreating you and treating you
Yeah.
like crap, you're allowing, first of all, that behavior. And second, you're showing your children that this behavior is normal. And that's where
Yeah.
that breaking of the chain starts to happen is if you
Mhm.
allow, and even if you're like, oh, my kids need to see their grandparents. No, they don't.
No,
A lot of my
they
grandparents
don't.
died, right? A lot of my grandparents died growing up. So like, you know what I mean? They don't. They need to be
Yeah.
around grandparents that are loving. You could even have adopted grandparents, like or an
Yeah.
adopted mom, a mom that's going to treat you like the mom that needs to give you that love and kindness and that stuff. So, talk a little bit
Absolutely.
about how hypnotherapy can really help someone who is struggling with the mother wound.
Yeah. So hypnotherapy is really okay. So the whole thing with it is getting you into a state of trance, right? And people think, oh, trance, like you're out of control, all this stuff, that like you think like, oh, I'm gonna make you quack like a duck. And it's like, no, it's not that at all. It's actually a state of intense focus. And so when you get into this state of focus and you're able to really like, because what it does is it quiets down like your cognitive brain, right? So your thinker, the one that's there, and it's there to protect you, right? Like, well, I'm not sure if that's true or this and that. And so when you can get into that place of trance, of this focus, that's when you can access your beliefs, your emotions, your memories. That's where your potential for change is. It's in this place just below, like if you're thinking about like levels, like just below your conscious mind. And
Mhm.
so that's where you can bring healing to that inner child, and stuff. And like there's so many techniques like, going back and like present day you going and comforting, like that 9-year-old version of yourself. Like, hey, it's okay. Like we made it out. This is what we're doing now. This is how much you've accomplished, and like, and you can switch out because it's the brain is really amazing, like our minds, where you can literally change the programming and saying, you know what, I'm choosing to release this now and I want to feel this instead. So
Yeah.
instead of feeling upset or depressed or anxious when I think about having, people who are low contact, like interacting with my mom again. Instead, I want to feel grounded and present and at peace. And you can change things around like that. So you literally do. Like I had one client, it was crazy. She was like, I just feel so angry when my mom comes up. And so, like, all right, well, how do you want to feel instead? And so I was like, all right. And so we're installing all these because it's important. It's like, obviously you want to get rid of the bad stuff, but to install good things, how do you want to feel instead? What positive things do you want to feel? And how do you want to act when this stuff happens?
Yeah.
And her mom actually showed up at her house like 20 minutes after our session. And she was like, I was so calm. I was totally okay. I was able to say what I wanted to say. And I'm like, yes, you were. Like it was such a great moment where it's like because that work had been done, it doesn't take forever.
Yeah.
Like of course there's the arching, like the journey of your life to heal and grow. But there is change that can happen and it can happen quickly. It's just a moment, like it's just kind of like a part of like just reorganizing things. And so
Yes.
that's where hypnosis is so powerful, is getting you into that place where it's easy to change stuff. It's easy to make those shifts so that you can start living the life you want. Like, and that's really what I want for everyone. Like I want to not be like under that burden of, oh, my mom this, or, we don't have a relationship. I feel bad, like all that's like, no, 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 like let's open you up. Like, what do you get to have now that this unhealthy attachment is gone? What do you gain when that's gone?
Yes. Oh,
and it's so much more empowering and like expansive than, yeah, it's amazing.
yeah,
So
I love that.
that's
I was just talking to a friend about that because I was telling her, like, you know, we get to choose where we spend our energy on,
yeah,
and if we're spending our energy and like wasting it on someone who is not going to, give it back,
yeah,
then spend your time with the people that do love, honor, and respect you. Like, give them your
mhm,
energy. Like, instead of trying to
yes,
figure out, like, what's wrong with my mom? Why, how can I make her love me? How can I make her happy? How do I make her not trigger me? And I love that you said that you replaced the bad with the good, because that's one
mhm,
thing that I've also learned is that when you take away the response, because sometimes
mhm,
the toxic parent, the toxic friend, the toxic husband or whatever, or boyfriend, when you don't give them the response, then they have nothing to feed on. And some
yeah,
people really love that. They want to get under your skin. They love the
mhm,
my mom, I loved telenovelas, which in Spanish is like,
uh-huh,
soap operas.
yeah,
She
yeah,
loved the drama and the fighting and the anger. She loved the outbursts of emotion. She thrived on that. And like you said earlier, I love, I give my mom grace. That's all she knew growing up. That's all she
yeah,
saw as the way we deal with our emotions. So I understand that's the way she is. But like when she tries to feed that to me and tries to get
mhm,
or, elicit an emotion out of me and she doesn't
mhm,
get it, she's kind of like, oh, okay. So she doesn't continue to poke because she realizes, like, I'm not at that level with her anymore. I'm not going to
mhm,
give her that energy back. I'm not going to play this back and forth tennis match of fight, fight, anger, anger, And so
yeah,
when you
yeah,
can really control your emotions is when you really start that healing pattern, And I love that you said that hypnotherapy can really help you. So if you're listening and you have the
yeah,
mother wound, try hypnotherapy. And I've tried so many different things. And I did try a hypnotherapy session with it's called RTT therapy, rapid
oh yeah, yeah,
transitional therapy. And I loved it. And I went back and I talked to my inner child and because my inner child went through a lot and I like picked her up and I was like, look where we live now. Look at the house
yeah,
that we live in. Look at the food that we have. Look at the husband that we have. Look at the clothes and the shoes and look at how peaceful this house is. It's like you're not that 9-year-old anymore and you don't have to
yeah,
continue to act like it. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways if you're listening, how important it is to go back and heal that little girl inside of you because she's the
yeah,
one that's in there in your head constantly talking to you and telling you we emergency, emergency, we've got to do something about
yeah.
it, when you're like, no, we don't
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, and I think too, a big part of that, like that like that younger version of ourselves is wanting to be heard, right? It's like you want your mom to finally hear you, to validate, like,
Yeah,
why, and you can't. You really can't. She's never gonna understand. She's never gonna be able to give you that love and that comfort and that validation that you need. And so you really do like whatever method of healing you choose, like find a way to give that to yourself, to say it's okay, to bring that comfort, to bring that validation, and
yeah,
to just and letting it go because she can't be that person for you. And if you're waiting for that apology, that moment of connection or resolution with her, like you're gonna be really unhappy because she can't do it. She just
no,
can't.
you're gonna
And
be
so the
waiting a
sooner you
long
can let
time.
go of that, you're gonna be waiting until she dies, and then you'll be like, well, now what? And it's like, well, no,
Yeah, and then that's a whole
that's
nother healing journey. I
that's a
know.
whole other level. So yeah.
I really like that you said that because people need to understand that there is a line of empathy to psychopath, you
Yeah.
know? And there's empathy, there's, sociopath, there's psychopath, and there's some people that just don't have that empathetic drop in themselves. And that's the thing is that
Mm,
like we expect people to act and react the way we do. But
yeah.
there are some people that just cannot admit, and apologize and take accountability. Those people get
Mhm.
defensive. Those are the narcissists that like just cannot help but always want to be right. And you know what I mean? And they just can't. And I was just listening to another podcast, and this therapist was talking about being in narcissistic relationships. And she says, I think the biggest thing that people don't understand is that the narcissist isn't a narcissist 100% of the time. They are
Yeah.
like that 75% of the time. They're manipulative, they're hurtful, they're conniving, they're, whatever, backstabbing. But 25% of the time, they can be nice and they can be
Hmm.
loving and they can be sweet and kind. And so that's what screws you up as a person, is because you're waiting for those little nuggets of the niceness.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think especially with mothers, like that's why it's so heartbreaking when you realize that your mom can't be that consistently like loving person in your life, and where it does create all these, this emotional upheaval and stuff. And that's, I think, yeah, like people have a hard time saying like, oh, my mom's toxic. It feels safer to say, well, she's emotionally immature, or she's like this, because it feels like a big thing to say, well, my mom's like, she is toxic, she is narcissistic, and stuff. Because they're not like that all the time. There are
Yeah,
good moments, there are good things. And and it really is, I really believe like it's because of their own wounding, their own stuff, where they like, if I say that I'm sorry, if I admit that I'm wrong, then my world crumbles, and they
yeah,
can't, and they will do anything to protect that. And that's really why we get some of those big like explosive responses, like when you try to confront a toxic parent, it's like, hey, when you did this and stuff, and you get this like, whoa, like this massive like reaction, it's because
yeah,
they're defending themselves. They feel so, like insecure, unstable, or whatever it is. And so that's part of why like these crazy things happen. And then you're like, I was just trying to make you hear me. I was just trying to make you understand,
yeah,
and so that's, once again, like they can't hear you.
yeah,
They can't let it go. They can't understand. And so yeah, just like being at peace with that, like, okay, I'm not going to get what I need from them, and that's okay.
yeah,
I can still heal. I can still move on. And this doesn't have to define my life. This doesn't have to affect every other aspect of my life. And as you go on, like you realize, oh, it affected that. Oh, look, that too. Like, there's so
oh
many,
man,
so
it
many
affected
things.
my whole life.
Yeah,
It
yeah. And
affected
there's
my
always
whole life.
layers, right?
Yeah,
Everything.
so many layers. And I just, you think about it and you do feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, why didn't I get a loving mother? Why didn't my mom think I was good
Mm,
enough? And you have these horrible feelings, especially like when Mother's Day comes around or the holidays
yeah.
come around. But let's
Hmm.
talk a little bit. I want to just touch on, because you do have children and you have the no
Yeah.
contact thing. Like, how do you have a conversation with your children who are like, where's grandma? Or why can't I have a grandmother? Or, you know what I mean? What conversation do you have with your children in order for them to understand why there is no contact?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's a little easy because my kids were so little when we ended up being no contact with them. So they don't know my parents at all. So for me, that's kind of easy. But for other people, this is what I always say, like the best way to explain it to your kids. And obviously it's age appropriate based on what they can understand. And I always just say it's such a great opportunity to teach them the kind of people they deserve to have in your life. Grandma isn't somebody who's safe or who's loving, and like obviously the wording and stuff would be different, but it's like grandma was mean to mom, grandma did this, however you want to say it. And we let people close to us who are kind, who are loving, who are respectful, and who care about how they make us feel. And so that would be the big thing. It's like it's a great opportunity instead of like, oh, well, you lost out on a grandma. Because what you said before, it's like, yeah, like they deserve to be around. Like they don't need grandma if grandma's toxic, right? Like just
Right?
because she becomes a grandmother doesn't magically mean your mom's this wonderful person who will be selfless and loving and kind and everything that you would want for your children. And
Yeah.
so saying, grandma, sadly, like grandma couldn't be a safe person for us to be around. And it's okay to not be around people who don't make you feel safe, who don't care about you, who can't be that safe space for you.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really like that's the big thing. Obviously as kids get older, you can explain a bit more. But it's once again, it's not focusing on what you've lost or like, oh well, you don't have a grandma. It's like, no, no, here's the people in your life who we know love you and are gonna support you and who are gonna be there for you. Like these are the people you can trust. and
Yeah.
like, and just shifting that focus really.
It's the
Um,
family you
yeah,
choose, versus
yeah,
the family
yeah,
you were given. And I think that was
mm,
really hard for me growing up because it was like, I wanted, you grow up with watching television and you see, like,
yeah.
especially in the 90s, you had like all these
Oh
like
yeah,
perfect little families, and you had the mom and the dad and you had sit down dinners and you had the grandma making cookies and, you had all these expectations as a child. But it's like you can create that. They don't have to
yeah,
be your actual mother or your actual father or your actual grandmother. You could create that
yeah.
and create the family that you choose and the family that
Hmm.
loves and gives you that, safe space to be you, authentically you,
Hmm.
rather than
Yeah,
having to put on a mask so that you're not like making little bombs go off, because that's how it felt growing up. Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to
yeah.
say anything, I don't want to do anything because I might step on the wrong eggshell and something's going to break, and
Hmm.
then all hell is going to break loose, and then there goes Thanksgiving. you know
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. And like, and that's where people, I made a video and talking about this. I'm like, if you don't have a relationship with your mom, then she doesn't get a relationship with your kids. And especially on Instagram, people were like, well, you're just horrible. Like so many like toxic people came out of the woodwork. I'm like, well, how could you do that? All this stuff. I'm like, no, like if I don't have a relationship with somebody, why would I let them have access to my children? I wouldn't let
Mm,
some stranger hang out with my kids just because, like, oh, well, why not? It's like, no, no, it just, and once
yeah.
again, it comes back to that title, right? Oh, it's your mom. No, if she can't care about me enough to have a good relationship with me and to be respectful and kind, why on earth would I sacrifice my children to this person? Why would I
Yes.
give her the opportunity to damage them the way that she did me and my siblings? Like that doesn't make any sense. It gets into like really crazy where people, unless you've experienced it, unless this is something you've been through, it's really hard to speak on. You can't understand. And it's just once
Yeah.
again, removing some of those labels, getting that distance. Okay, yeah, it's my mom, and she's not safe for us to be
Yeah.
around.
I-
It's sad that she doesn't get to be a grandma, but she's still not safe.
Right? But that's her choice, right? Because
Yeah,
everyone
it is
can
100%.
choose to make the changes, to become more self aware, to grow and evolve and do the therapy and do the work.
Hmm.
Everyone can do it.
Yeah,
And I'm not like a proponent that, like, yeah, miracles can happen. Some people can
yeah, they
change,
can.
but they have to do the work. They can't just say, oh,
Yeah.
I've changed. I've changed. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to be better. Or I went to one therapy session. I'm good. Let me see my grandchildren. Like, no, it doesn't work that
Uh-huh.
way. Like, changed behavior is what you want to see. Words are something completely
Yes.
different. But I also love the quote that says you can't heal in the same place you got hurt. So if you're really
Yeah.
on your healing journey and wanting to heal your mother wound, and you still have that mother there, and you're still
Yeah.
allowing her to be in, and sometimes I'm just going to no contact you for the next 5 years and put a cap on it. And you could be like, Mom, I'm not going to talk to you for the next 5 years because I need to take care of me. And in those 5 years, if you want to do the work to take care of you, cool. And then let's come back in 5 years. If still she has not changed, that's on her, that's on
Yeah.
her and not on you, because you're doing the work. You're doing everything to not only protect yourself, but to protect your children. And that's one thing that, like, I learned in my journey, is that no one was there to protect me when I was a little girl. No
Mm.
one was there.
Yeah.
But now I can be there for her, and you can be
Uh-huh.
there for yourself.
100%.
So, as we
Yeah.
wrap up this episode, what would be your nugget of
Yes.
wisdom for anyone who is listening today and who is like at the beginning of their mother wound healing journey?
Oh man, I think the biggest thing is, yeah, I've said it a lot and stuff, and I was thinking about this, and I think my nugget has changed a little bit, but I really think that the biggest thing is to just make space for yourself, to give yourself permission to do what is best for you, and let it be. Because you can't, nobody else can speak into your situation. Nobody else knows what you need like you do. And so when you can make space for yourself to feel what you feel, to validate those emotions, that's going to be one of the best things that you can ever do. So
Oh,
that's where I would start.
I love that. Okay, how can my audience find you?
Okay, so I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Catherine underscore the Grace. There are some scammies out there, but that's me. So not them. So it's Catherine underscore the Grace. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram. And I also have a private Facebook group. So you can find that link through my TikTok. But yeah, TikTok is really the hub. So that's where you can find everything.
Nice. And can you tell them a little bit about your coaching program and how they can get that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, all the links are on TikTok and Instagram. So if you want to work with me one on one, I have consultations available. That's the best way to like, hey, do I even have a toxic mom? What do I do? Getting advice on this situation. And depending on, because everybody needs something different. So some people need, I just need to know what to do for this. Okay, great. I can help with that. Or if you're like, no, there's all this emotional stuff coming up, like, let me, how can I work with you? Like, that's the best place to start is a toxic mom consultation so we can just kind of get an idea of where you are and the best way to help you move forward.
Yeah. And it's perfect for the holidays, guys. Since we're about to
Yeah,
go into the
I
holidays,
know.
it's the perfect time to start your healing journey with your mother.
Absolutely. I know. Start healing before you have to deal with all that mess.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.